Good morning. My name is Susan Reardon. I'm the staff hearing officer, and I call the meeting of Wednesday, June 8th to order. Today we have 2 items on our agenda, and I haven't received any requests for continuances, postponements, or withdrawals, so we'll hear them in the order they occur on the agenda. Under announcements and appeals, I've had no recent appeals, and I have no announcements. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the staff hearing officer on items not on today's agenda? Seeing no one, we'll go to the first item, which is 302 Piedmont Road, if the applicant would like to come up to the table. Great, thanks. Anytime you're ready, Joanne.
Okay. This property is zone A1, and it's a 27,393 square foot lot. Current development on site and consists of a single family dwelling with an attached 2-car garage and a detached pool cabana of about 473 net square feet. The proposed project is for a new pool, spa, outdoor bar with a barbecue area, new accessory building of 201 square feet, landscaping and associated grading. The project was reviewed and approved by the Single Family Design Board in June of 2015. The original project included everything except the 201 square foot accessory building. So the project got approval from the Single Family Design Board. It got a building permit issued for the work that was under that proposal, and after that the applicant came back in to enclose the area. This area for the accessory space was approved by the board, but it wasn't entirely enclosed, and now it is entirely enclosed, and it requires a modification approval. So the requests before you today are a modification to allow the detached accessory space in the front yard, and to allow a modification to allow the detached accessory space on the lot, the total amount to exceed 500 square feet. The zoning ordinance allows for a maximum of 500 square feet of detached accessory buildings, and other than garages on the lot. The zoning ordinance does not allow accessory buildings except garages to be located in the front yard. Therefore, that's the first request. The accessory structure is located out of the required 35-foot setback, but it is located in the remaining front yard, which is one of the modifications being requested. The other modification is for the total accessory space on the lot to exceed 500 square feet, since there is an existing 473 square foot cabana, and with the 201 square foot detached accessory building, it will exceed the total amount by 174 square feet. So this property is unusual. It's located at the end of a dead-end street, and it has a 45-foot street width at the front, and it's heavily screened by landscaping and walls surrounding the property. Staff is in support of the request to allow the accessory structure in the remaining front yard due to the location of the existing development on site, and to allow the detached accessory space to exceed the maximum amount. Previously, the pool was located in the rear, and the cabana served that pool. However, when they redesigned the project, the pool is now being located in this area. The purpose of this accessory space is to enclose the pool equipment and to allow for a changing room and a half bath in close proximity to the pool. And so that's how we got where we are today. Like I said, staff supports the proposal based on it's not anticipated to adversely impact the adjacent neighbors or visually impact the street frontage. It won't be visible because it's below the existing bar, and if you turn the page you'll see more of that. But for right now, I just wanted to point out some things that were observed out in the field. When we went out this field, there was a small detached storage shed in the setback, as well as a chicken coop and a skateboard ramp. So staff has added conditions that the small detached accessory structure will be removed, and these 2 items will either be shown to comply with the ordinance or be removed from the property, as well as removing any stored items from the interior setbacks. That concludes staff presentation.
Okay, great, thank you. Would you like to state your name for the record and provide additional comments?
No additional comment.
What's your name?
Joe from Don Sherry's office.
Joe?
Yes.
What's your last name?
Cho, CHO.
Okay, so when Joanne had explained the project that was approved by the Single Family Design Board,
Yes.
where was the pool equipment at that time? Was it located underneath, or was it?
That was a separate, was that enclosed shed here.
Okay,
But now we relocate this approved shed under this deck.
okay.
So as was elevation or site plan, nothing was changed, but we removed already approved shed location. So we put the pool equipment and add one additional changing room and powder room under this approved deck. So in elevation, nothing was changed.
So what was approved by the SFDB was this, the wall was here with the roof and the, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah,
Okay.
all loop is stay same.
Okay.
We just excavate the lower level and put changing room, powder room, and relocate pool equipment area.
Okay. And why does the equipment room, pool equipment room need to be so large? The reason why I'm asking is just given the lot size and the amount of accessory space you're asking for, and it's greater than the ordinance provisions. I understand the benefits of having the changing room, powder room by the pool. It doesn't make sense to have people walk either up to the house or on the other side for the cabana. But this seems large, rather large for pool equipment. Is that pretty standard size, or is there other uses that's going to occur in that area?
No, we just use it just for pool equipment size only. This is based on the location of the new, was the retaining wall and structural region.
Okay.
We made just this size for the structural region, and we make this room under this proposed deck. Then we put the smallest size of powder room and changing room, and this is kind of a leftover space for pool equipment only.
Okay. All right, great, thank you. I'd like to open the public hearing. I have one request to speak from Warren. Thank you, Schlichter. If you'd like to come up, you can sit in this chair right here and use this microphone.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. The name is Warren Schluter. I live at the end of Canyon Acres Drive.
Okay.
So I received notice of the hearing because my property must be within 300 square feet. My property does not abut this project. My only concern has to do with front yard setbacks and what precedent might be established. I'm always concerned about people coming a few years later and saying, well, you approved this, and why won't you give me what I'm asking for? So that's my only concern. I was not familiar with the earlier approval by the Planning Commission for the project, so I'm just curious, well, not curious, just had not been notified, as I recall, about that hearing. I would have addressed that, my concern at that point. So that's my only concern.
Okay. Two responses. Well, one, Joanne can talk about the noticing requirements. It was actually the Single Family Design Board that reviewed the barbecue area and the equipment over here. What they're requesting is to allow an accessory space in the front yard. That's different than a front setback. I share your concern with a front setback, that we look at those more in depth, or not more in depth, we look at all of it in depth, but that's a...
I misstated. I meant the front yard, not the setback.
Okay.
Now, I realize that there's a 35-foot setback that apparently is measured from the end of the street, the end of Piedmont, or where their entry plinths are located.
Yeah, it's the edge of the public right-of-way. So in this instance, since this is the public right-of-way right here, that's this line. You see this green line?
Right.
This is considered an interior setback since it's not on a public street, and then it pops back here for the front setback and comes back in.
So I meant the front yard.
Okay. All right, so I just want to clarify that. And then
Sure.
Joanne, in regards to noticing with the single-family design board,
The original project did not,
require noticing?
I have the
Well, that
File here.
doesn't matter.
did not require the modification, so therefore.
There was a modification that triggered the,
Because it was
notification.
oversized. What happened originally is they had the whole structure, it wasn't entirely enclosed, but the structure was there. And you could have the structure there if it was just a structure and not a building. So when they enclosed it, which basically put a door and another wall, that
yes.
became the issue. But the structure was there. I have a copy of the approved plans.
That's
if you
fine.
want.
No, yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
thank you.
great, thank you for coming. Is there anyone else who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 302 Piedmont Avenue? Seeing no one, have we received any emails or phone calls? No. I'll close the public hearing. I did go out to the site and walked around the neighborhood just to get an idea of the street. I'm not familiar with that area. And like Mr. Schuletter said, anytime there's something proposed in the front yard or the front setback, it's raised kind of to a higher level because it is part of the neighborhood, part of the community setting. It's visible. It's not the same as an interior setback, although interior setbacks have the potential to impact your neighbor. There's just more of a community type interest. In this particular situation, this modification to allow the accessory space in the front yard I can find is appropriate for a couple of reasons. The first is that it is below grade. It won't be visible from the public road. This property is at the end of the street, and it is, like you said, like Joanne said, screened from vegetation, and it's actually at an angle that's not directly in view of the street. So it's to the side, although the portion that I'm looking at and approving doesn't change what already is approved with this structure, that if any part of it would be visible from the street, it would be this above grade part. So I can make the findings for the modification to allow the accessory space to be in the front yard. In regards to accessory space, this property is zoned A1, and it is undersized for that zone. And has the way that the house is laid out, it's long, diagonal across the property. The size you're requesting isn't significantly above the maximum. The maximum is 500 square feet, and you're proposing 674. So it's not significantly above it, which would be my concern if it was larger size, given your lot is on the small size for the 1 acre zone, that may not be appropriate. That's why I was questioning you why you need that larger pool equipment area. And I agree, it makes sense in terms of the design aspect that makes it interesting, the curved effect and that kind of thing, that you do want to just fill the understory area. And so you put a wall and you make it smaller, and you say it's 500 square feet. It's not really going to change anything on the exterior or the amount of building area or impermeable area, or that area on the site. So I believe that I can find that the requested size is appropriate for your lot. Staff is proposing several conditions, and I assume you've read them. They're included in the staff report, and you agree with them? Yeah, okay. I don't believe I need to add any additional conditions. I think these cover it. So I can make the findings outlined in the staff report and approve your project subject to those conditions of approval. And my action is appealable within 10 calendar days to the Planning Commission. They also have oversight authority of all my actions. And if they felt this warranted additional discussion before them, they could call it up during that same 10-day review period. And if either of those would occur, Joanne would contact you.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, sure. So we'll go to the next item, which is 200 Helena Avenue. The applicant would like to come up. You want to keep this for your file right now? I think she gave it to me. Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
soon as I sit down.
Anytime you're ready, Alice. Anytime you're ready.
Oh, yeah, like 6 plus.
Okay, good morning. As you said, this is a proposed project at 200 Helena. The project involves development of an approximately 10,000 square foot lot in the OC zone, including construction of a new 2,355 square foot building at the northeast corner of Helena and Yananali Streets. The development also includes 9 parking spaces to serve the building, as well as a valet parking area. The existing development on site would be demolished. The proposed structure has a maximum height of 27 feet 3 inches to the top of the roof structure. The proposed valet parking lot would not be a lot where patrons would drop off or pick up their cars. It's proposed to serve basically as a storage area for a valet operation for other parcels. Currently, it's identified for use by the Hotel Indigo on State Street. So the project requires approval of a development plan for approximately 1,300 square feet of net new non-residential floor area and a coastal development permit for the entire development. The project complies with minimum zoning requirements for setbacks, height, and parking. 4 bicycle parking spaces are included, which is more than the 1 space that's required, and staff is very supportive of providing this additional bicycle parking, especially for this neighborhood. The project was reviewed by the Architectural Board of Review on 3 separate occasions, most recently February 16th, 2016, where they found the project to be appropriate for the neighborhood. Since that meeting, the applicant has prepared visual simulations of the project. Staff does have just some concern that the building is not entirely consistent with the neighborhood. Our main concern is along the Helena Avenue frontage, where the building is approximately 6 inches from the edge of the sidewalk. And this was an aspect of the project that the ABR had asked the applicant to address. When the ABR reviewed it, the building was right at that property line. So since then, it's been moved in 6 inches. Staff also has concerns about 2 aspects of the project, and they're both related to parking. So in order to approve the coastal development permit, the project must be found consistent with policies of the local coastal plan. And our local coastal plan includes several policies related to the provision of adequate off-street parking. The first concern related to parking has to do with the proposed use of the building. So the parking that's been provided is at a ratio of 1 space per 250 square feet, and that is a typical ratio for a commercial building. However, because the property is located in the OC zone, we know that the uses that are allowed within that building are relatively limited as opposed to other commercial buildings. Restaurants, wine bars, and tasting rooms seem to be the uses that we're seeing most often in this zone, and those types of uses are usually subject to a higher parking ratio based on the number of seats in the space, and so that's a ratio of 1 parking space per 3 seats. Applicants often try to circumvent this by showing fewer seats in the space. And this is something that's really difficult for staff to enforce. Once the project gets built out, regulating how many seats are actually provided within the space is very difficult. And it can lead to or contribute to parking shortages in the area. So because the project is proposed as a shell building, we don't know who the future uses may be. It may be that they are uses that fit within the one space per 250 square foot ratio. However, we're just concerned that that will not be the case. The second concern has to do with the roof deck. And again, because the building is a shell building, we don't know who the users are going to be, and we don't have detailed information about the exact use of that roof deck. Use of the deck could impact parking and even traffic, depending on the number of people using the space, the days and times of the use, et cetera. So without knowing this ultimate use of the deck, staff has to look at it using a worst-case scenario type of analysis. And so also, given that there is elevator access to the building, we think that it's intended to be, an integral part of the building and is anticipated to have significant use. No parking has been provided separately for this deck, and therefore staff does not think that the findings to approve a coastal development permit can be made without some type of restrictions on that deck. So, in order to address these concerns, staff has recommended 2 conditions of approval that significantly limit the use of the building as well as the roof deck. And so with these conditions, staff is comfortable that the findings for the coastal development permit can be made. Basically, if the future use of the deck goes beyond what's outlined in those conditions, then the community development director could review the change and determine if an amendment to the coastal development permit is required. Additionally, since the staff report and draft conditions were released, the city attorney recommended an additional condition to address the valet parking area. The condition would amend condition B9, and we've got a copy of it there. It would add letter B, which reads that use of the valet parking area by off-site users shall be subordinate to use of the lot as required parking for on-site users, as required by the zoning ordinance. Should the use of the site require more parking than is provided in the 9-space parking lot, the additional required parking shall be provided on-site, subject to approval of the revised parking design by the Transportation Division. The area available for valet parking use shall be adjusted in order to accommodate the additional required parking. Only parking areas deemed to be excess shall be available as valet parking to off-site users. So with the inclusion of the conditions of approval identified by staff can support the project, making the findings that are outlined in the staff report. And that concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you. I don't think I have questions at this time. Would you like to state your name for the record and provide additional comments?
Sure. My name's Clay Arell, architect with AB Design Studio. Architect for the project with me is Matt Beausoleil from AB Design Studio, and Jarrett Gorin, representing Vanguard Planning.
Okay.
I'd like to make a couple comments.
Sure.
Just point of clarification on a couple things. The existing structure that was there has actually been removed. Demo permit was pulled quite a while ago. I'm sorry, about a month and a half ago. And the building was removed. So right now we're looking at pretty much a vacant site. It still does have the fencing up around here, and if you've probably been to the site, you've noticed it's in really good condition. So we're really looking forward to improving this corner of the funk zone. I also wanted to help clarify a little bit about the valet lot. Staff didn't elaborate too much, but I thought it might be helpful. The owner of the property actually owns the Indigo Hotel, which is about 1 block that way and half a block south. They currently have a 42 key hotel with a restaurant associated, and they have 9 parking spaces on site. So their current operation is already utilizing a valet system for their patrons, and this property availed itself a very great proximity to the hotel use with an open area naturally to support that. So there will be no, as staff recommended or suggested and conditioned the project, there will be no dropping off here. It's strictly a shuttling of a car from a pickup spot a block and a half away to here, and then the employees running back and doing the same thing, or coming here and fetching cars. So there's no intended drop-off or anything like that. So I just wanted to shed some light on that. As part of this project, the owner has agreed and offered early on, but also now agreed with the condition to improve this area. This currently is dirt from right about here, from this line to, I think, a little bit further down, but I know it comes, this is all dirt here, so there is no sidewalk along here. So part of our project has always intended to bring forth the necessary improvement, I think, to the completion of the sidewalk from Upper Helena to Lower Helena, connecting it to Yananali. So we believe that's always been a benefit of this project. It's always been part of our intent and design. We're also in a zone that doesn't require any setbacks, and given the nature of our project, we actually have an existing driveway cut here and an existing driveway cut here. So as to not further complicate the area or move things over, our design has really been responding to existing conditions and where we could actually put a building located roughly in the same location as the prior building. And naturally, with our parking standards and guidelines, putting a double-loaded aisle of 90-degree parking requires a certain dimension, and so that's really kind of set up where we've gotten, and we've pulled it back a little bit, and we've tried several things to pull it back even further, but we're really pretty much hemmed in on this dimension, so that's kind of how that's ended up evolving over time. But we felt it was very necessary to pull away from the corner to really open this up and to have it be inviting as you're coming into the OC zone, the funk zone, if you will, from State Street, as many tourists and others, locals do. Getting a little bit more into some of staff's comments, and I'll let Jarrett really dig more into that. You know, our project has always intended to be a 1 per 250 use. We've designed it that way. We know that the OC zone's limited. I've done a lot of projects in the OC zone, so we're currently working with the owners and working with brokers to establish the uses that can go in the building. But as you know, or maybe just to enlighten a bit, you know, a lot of what happens in this area and in other areas these days is you got to build the building and then the tenants will come and the tenants will really kind of drive that. And so we feel that our project is really bringing forth the opportunity to put OC zone compliant conforming uses in the project at a 1 per 250 use, and the brokers we're all working with brokers and potential tenants to try to facilitate that as much as possible. We have no intention of putting a restaurant in here. I've already told the owners they can't do that. No coffee shops, no anything that would be a 1 per 100 use or a 1 per 3 seat use for that matter. Wine tasting rooms have all been listed as 1 per 250 uses in this area and other areas, and so you know, we're anticipating if that was to come in that they would be required to be a 1 per 250 use. So all of that has been in the spirit of our trying to take a non-conforming use on this project, which was a manufacturing use, and turn it into a conforming use, as well as provide ample parking and more parking than we probably need. So that's all been part of the goals of this project. So I wanted to illuminate that because I feel like some of the conditions seem to suggest that we may be trying to do something in the future that we're not intending to do. So we're really been focusing our efforts with our owner, with the brokers, and with our design team, and with Jarrett from Vanguard to really make sure that what we're doing here is in the spirit and the letter of the code. So I wanted to offer that up. I don't know that we need to get too far into the design of the project. The requirement for the elevator is to access the roof deck, because the roof deck is a beautiful spot. We're going to be up 25 feet, or well, probably 24 feet head height, and you've got an unobstructed view down corridor down Helena and into the ocean, as well as up to the mountains to the northeast. Sorry.
The Northwest.
Northeast. Covers all of it, west and east.
Santa Barbara, that's a new term I'm going to start using.
Northeast and west. That's the northwest. So we feel that it's definitely a benefit for the tenants of the property. It has the opportunity potentially for events for them and things of that nature.
And the ADA requires it.
But the elevator is really for the ADA requirement, and the stairs are for the obviously exiting requirements. So we've really tried to contain, no pun intended, the building within a very small footprint, and put in the necessary things that we know are required for building code, as well as for ADA and other things like that. We've been through an exhaustive process with ABR, I would say, in really kind of getting this project aesthetically to a level they feel comfortable with. We feel pretty comfortable with it as well. I would say that it's a unique project and probably one of the first of its kind here in Santa Barbara, especially in the funk zone. And if I may pontificate for 1 second, the OC zone is ocean commercial related, and nothing is more emblematic than a shipping container bringing goods from China across the ocean. So it's been a very fun exercise to try to get this approved within the ABR confines and be able to kind of see the light of why we think that's interesting. We also think it's interesting because the length of construction is very much shortened as most of the containers are prepared off-site and delivered and literally installed. So from a construction period and timeline, it'll be really compressed, and we feel that that is also a benefit to the direction. And if we can get into building permits and get to the next step, I think we're going to find that this will be developed in a very short order, and I think that that's also a boon of this project. We are also dealing with Tier 3 and all those other requirements, and this project will be handling that as well, as adding landscaping and things of that nature per request of ABR and good design measures. We didn't have much of a comment about the added language on the valet lot. I'll let, I don't know if you may have other questions about design or aesthetics that you want to ask me. I'm happy to do that, but I'll let you speak if you want to speak on towards some of the other
Sure.
items.
So Jarrett Gorin from Vanguard Planning, and I'm going to just specifically address condition language, and I'm going to do it in reverse. So condition 9 on the valet lot is fine with us. We understand if things start to exceed parking, then the site gets served first and the valet thing is secondary, and this is totally appropriate, and we like this language is fine. Condition 8 about the roof deck also is fine. Again, we're not trying to slide anything in here. It's as we propose it, and if it's being used otherwise, then this condition covers that, and we're okay with it. On condition 7 here, this condition, we're okay with this condition basically up to the first period. Everything after that becomes sort of narrative and speculative, and it's sort of unconventional condition language. It's weird to see language in a condition that says things like this means that and typically parked at and et cetera. What this condition is attempting to do is it's basically attempting to say that we are going to require this review for uses that don't exceed 250, 1 per 250 square feet. So per this current language, if we had a winery that didn't exceed 1 space per 250 square feet, staff is going to take this language and they're still going to say that that requires additional review, and it doesn't. That's a new requirement. That's a new layer of review that is not placed on everybody else under the same zoning in the same zone district, same zoning classification that enjoys the same range of uses. And it isn't necessary to have all of this additional language to be able to make the finding that you need to make. The language that you need to be able to make your finding is that anything that exceeds 1 per 250 is subject to additional environmental review. And that's covered in the first sentence of this condition, which we're okay with. So we respectfully request that you strike everything in this condition following the and/or staff hearing officer review and approval period. So the sentence that starts with this means that restaurants, et cetera, that's all superfluous, and it's really, it's just sort of confusing. I mean, what about other uses that we're not proposing? Are those just going to be substantial conformity because they aren't discussed here? You know, I mean, it's just, is this how we're going to start to get into writing conditions? I just don't think it's a good precedent to set. So we respectfully request you strike that language, and we don't think it's necessary for the findings.
Okay, great, thank you. Is there any other, did you want to add anything? No?
Just as a side to what Jared is speaking to, we recently did the Third Window Brewery at the Mill project right over here, which I know some people have been enjoying. They were parked at 1 per 250 for their tasting area. I mean, it is a little bit concerning, or that the suggestion is that if we put a winery in here, then it needs an additional review or an amendment to the CDP. That's kind of where we're coming from, that it's a little atypical to condition in that kind of fashion, given, historically speaking, most of the wine tasting in the Funk Zone and other areas are at 1 per 250 parked. So,
Thank you. I don't know if you want to respond to that, Allison. The way I read this is that it's just putting the people on notice, future owners, tenants, and that if you're proposing this type of use, you need to come into the city and check in. It's not saying you need additional environmental review, additional staff hearing officer review. It's more of show us your use, and if you come and it is a wine tasting, it is 1 per 250, it's fine. It's consistent with this condition. Is that what staffs mean? Do you want to explain a little more, Allison, what
Sure.
was
The
intended?
intent and the reason that we added those extra sentences was to be clear that although many wine tasting rooms, et cetera, have come in and used the limitation of the 1 per 250 square foot ratio, the way they're able to do that is by showing very few seats inside. It's technically still parked at a seats ratio.
Oh.
They just show fewer seats, therefore they're able to get in using the parking that's already provided. And what we found is that the seats that are shown are not realistic. Benches get added, tables get added, that sort of thing. And so what we wanted to do in this condition is be very clear that we don't want to play that game in this case. This is a new building, and we want it to be parked consistent with coastal policy as well as the zoning ordinance. So that was the intent of the additional language on that condition.
Okay, great,
So
thank you.
what the wording says, it says this means restaurants, wine bars, tasting rooms would not be allowed without additional analysis.
Correct. Thank you.
That's-
I understand your point. That's good. I had her respond. I'm fine. I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 200 Helena Avenue? Seeing no one, have we received any correspondence? I thought I saw in terms of the ABR there was some correspondence.
That's
but
correct. We didn't receive any directly addressed to the staff hearing officer, but I did bring copies of, I think, 4 emails that were sent to the ABR, and they were all supportive of the project.
Okay,
so
great.
we have copies of those.
and
All right.
we've never had anybody come speak against the project, by the way, just
Okay.
for the record.
Didn't look like it in the minutes, but I just wanted to check. Okay, great, thank you. So I'll close the public hearing. I do have some questions. It's good to hear your comments regarding the parking situation. There wasn't much information in the application letter regarding the valet parking area, what it's intended, how it's intended to function. Looking at the site plan, I see there's finger planters here. Is this going to be open, integral part?
Currently, it's open, yes,
Okay.
and that, we've had it closed, and ABR suggested it open. We've gone open and closed a couple times around the corner with that, but currently it's open. The valet lot is intended to be accessed from here solely.
Okay. Well, yeah, because also in terms of requirement, a parking lot that's not associated with the building requires a CUP. So if it's not open and used as one, it would require a CUP, which is a different approval. So I just wanted to make sure. The other question I had, and I'd like you to explain as part of being the architect for it, there's several policies in the coastal plan that talks about visual resources. And I agree that this is not an area that's identified as highly visually significant in terms of public view blockage and that kind of stuff. But there is a lot of talk about landscaping for parking lots and screening it from public view and providing landscaping to break up the expanse of parking. And our zoning ordinance requires a 5-foot perimeter planter and then finger planters every 8 parking spaces. And here there's not 8 parking spaces. You're providing a finger planter. I'm not sure if it's exactly 5 feet or not. And this is a parking area. And when you look at the exterior planters, they're just maybe 3 feet. And there's a little one here. There's not really any, I know there's a fence here, but there's not any landscaping here. And it's just a large paved area. I saw that the ABR said that there is they made the compatibility findings that said something to the fact that since it's an urban area, the landscaping is adequate. Our code requires, and even in the waterfront area design guidelines, there's discussion about landscaping and that. Our code requires that if they're to waive the requirement for the perimeter planner and the interior planners, that they can, but where there's alternative landscaping and designs are presented that result in landscaping and designs that are equally effective. I don't see any of that note inside the minutes, and I don't know what kind of landscape is on the site to offset that. So can you explain about the landscaping?
Oh, well, I don't know if that the waiver was specific. Excuse me, specifically, tough word this morning, addressed the way you've read the ordinance. I do know that with ABR we've worked extensively to improve this parkway and this parkway, which right now are dirt. The inclusion of the street trees and additional trees on site as well. And we've worked with ABR to provide as much planting as we can in these areas, understanding that the viewpoint that we've had and the viewpoint that ABR has seemingly had is that we're really looking at what are the impacts from this kind of procession, if you will. This is intended to be fenced and with a gate such that really this isn't going to be too visible from Helena when on a daily basis. My suspicion is on the valet operations that this will be open and closed, and a lot of times people drop their cars off and don't use their cars for 2 days, and they just sit here. From this perspective, however, you will be looking into a parking lot. The addition of trees and planter areas in here was really to help screen this area, and we feel that it's back far enough that it's not going to be really an issue in our minds. The inclusion of as much planting areas around the parking as we could get is part of the project, and ABR's compatibility findings, in my mind, address that comment. So I think that we've worked with them extensively to make sure that we could get as much in here and still have the functioning site that we need.
Okay. All right, so their purview is design. My purview is the coastal development permit and finding consistency with coastal policies. And so, when I look at the coastal policies that talk about, there's these, staff included some in the staff report, which I'm sure that you've read. There's 9.5, all parking facilities shall be screened from public view in a method suggested by the scenic highway element. There's the general view of the waterfront and the mountains, which I said in this instance is really not that identified as an important resource. There's another policy that's 9.2 that wasn't included here. It talks about area-wide design standards for use in the review, and that's where you lump in the waterfront area design guidelines. So I'm not sure that they looked at the compatibility standards, but I don't know if they have these fresh in their mind, and then also our coastal plan and the urban design guidelines. So I do have concerns with the amount of landscaping. However, it's not something that I think that I need to not take an action on today. I can add a condition and just have the ABR look at it. And I was thinking something that additional landscaping or trees, but I'm not sure trees would really be appropriate in this area, shall be added to the valet parking area to screen the parking lot from the public street and surrounding properties, provide a buffer between the building and parking areas, and to break up the expanse of paving. And that way they can look at it and work with you on the design aspect and come up with something that would work.
Can I provide a little additional information that could help with that as well?
Go ahead.
With the coastal plan and with any general plan, obviously, like policies are always weighed against each other, right? And not one policy doesn't trump another policy. They're weighed together, and coastal plan obviously places a high priority on providing parking as well. And here, a lot of what's generating the issue with landscaping is the requirement to meet dimensions for parking. We could provide more landscaping, but it would cut down on the amount of parking we could provide.
This is fine. There's no designated parking here. It's valet. It's going to, however many you can cram in there, tandem and everything.
It's providing parking for a non-conforming site that's currently not required to meet parking at all in the coastal
That's fine. You don't have to trash this site to provide for that site. I think landscaping is really important, and yes, you do balance the different issues, And I believe landscaping, and I agree, I don't really particularly care for the architecture, but you're improving the site over what was there in terms of the older building that's more dilapidated and stuff. So, you are improving the site in terms of its new development and that kind of thing. I just think it can be enhanced by adding additional landscaping in this area.
And I would like to respectfully request some clarification on that, because a lot of times what happens is we have conditions that come up in a hearing such as this or the Planning Commission, and it goes back to the ABR, and the ABR looks at it and goes, I have no idea what they're talking about.
Well,
we think it's
Allison will
fine.
be going
So,
to the design board.
But just so I'm clear, because you're making it sounds like you're moving towards making a CDP finding with a condition that is a bit unclear to me, so I want to be able to address it clearly when I go back. So if what I understand you're saying is you're looking to have this area more screened from the public way, in my mind that's what you're saying. And when I say public way, or when I think public way, I'm thinking along Yananali looking in or Helena looking in.
Mm-hmm.
So from that standpoint, we have a fence and a gate here that would provide screening, and if that's inadequate, two-part question. We have a gate and a fence that is here to provide necessary screening from the public way along Helena. So if that's inadequate, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. We have a building that obviously is screening a large portion of this lot from the public way. So we're currently, in the current design, we have a fence to here, a building to here, and then we've got the view into here. So my second part question is, if you're talking about screening along this area specifically, then can you be a little bit more clear about that? Because obviously locating a tree in here doesn't make any sense for the intent of the use of the property. And I'm hoping that ABR doesn't consider that as, well, let's just put a bunch of trees in here, and then that basically removes the functionality of the valet lot.
All parking areas need to comply with our parking design standards, so that you're going to have to get a waiver from the parking staff regarding striping and that kind of stuff in the tandem. It also requires the perimeter planters, which are at least 5 feet in depth, which these don't comply with. So perimeter planter, it requires interior planters, which I understand is not going to make sense. That's something that the ABR is going to have to look at. And then screening from the street. What they need to do, they can reduce or we waive the requirements regarding the 5-foot planting area where alternative landscaping and design are presented that results in landscaping and design that are equally effective. So they may find out that, okay, I can waive this 5-foot buffer. We don't need anything in this area, which I understand it doesn't make sense because this is a gate. So it'd be more, it's paving, it would be more in there. So they need to look at it and they need to specifically state what are the alternatives that meet this intent. So they can't just say.
That's the clarification.
I thought I said that originally too, that with these 2 requirements. And you're saying that I'm putting conditions to make the findings. Well, the alternative, I can just remove the conditions and deny the project. I have findings I need to make. And as it's proposed, it doesn't meet it. So if you want me to take an action today, or I can continue it, and you come back and do the landscaping and show it, those are the alternatives.
I think we're clear on it. What we wanted to be clear on is we wanted the ABR not to get confused and think that you were asking them to require us to put trees into the valet parking area, and therefore
No, I don't know if they want a tree over here and here.
Sure.
I understand that the whole intent is to have it to be parking, so it's not going to meet the traditional thing, but the things it can meet, it should. It can meet landscaping. You can make it pretty. It doesn't have to be this storage area of cars. You can try to make it look as nice as you can. And I really I'm glad you had these 2 constraints that you told me about, because that's another policy, is to have the building up more close to the public right of way and have the parking in the back.
Yeah.
So you meet that policy too. You're doing a lot of things, but it's just, there's other policies that I want you to take into consideration. And I don't fault the ABR. They don't deal with the coastal plan. They don't know all the policies and everything. And if that case planner's not there to tell them, they don't know. So my understanding is after it goes to the SHO, at least for the first hearing, the case planner accompanies the project and lets the design board know what the discussion was and what the either the planning commission or the staff hearing officer wants them to look at.
And now we're clear on it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. That's why I asked. Perfect.
Um, Okay, let me, so in terms of the development plan approval, the staff report discusses how you're getting the different square footages and stuff, and the required findings for the development plan. You're not requesting any modifications. That's good. We just had a big in-depth discussion about the different policies. I agree with staff. The main policy is with parking, and it's good to hear that you are aware of it and you understand the potential limitations. Although they're not limitations, it's just come in when you give an idea what you're going to do. Come in and check with us, and we'll let you know if it fits with what was envisioned in terms of the parking, or whether you need to designate a couple more parking spaces over here for the particular use. I agree with the third finding relates to will not have a significant adverse impact on the community's aesthetic character, and the size, bulk, and scale of development will be compatible with the neighborhood based on the project compatibility analysis. I agree with the ABR's direction regarding stepping the building back, and the concern that staff has regarding the setback. And I'm not going to add a condition or not, but I'm just going to have the minutes reflect that I agree with the direction of the ABR, that they look at the relationship of this building face, and that's up to you to work with them. But that I support that, given the coastal policies that are relative to this project. In regards to the conditions of approval, I don't have a concern with number 7, and I don't think it's a new precedent-setting to add that additional discussion in the condition. I think it makes it more clear. It doesn't mean that it's going to require an amendment. It's kind of like the condition or the notice that's at the end of the resolutions all the time, that if the scope of the project exceeds, that's what was reviewed and approved by the staffing officer, you need to come back in. So it just kind of puts everyone on notice, just so it's clear in the future that you should come in and talk to staff about that. In regards to the roof deck, it's a similar thing, that it's just more of, if you get a better idea of what your intended use is of that area, then come in and check with staff. The valet landscaping that I just said, that condition that I was going to add, I'm going to put that in C4 under design review so that they can see that. And then the valet parking lot that Allison was proposing to add. Huh? B9? Yeah, okay, so that one will be added. So the way you have it here, oh, I see, B9, so it's going to be A and B now instead of just the one. Okay, all right, so with those comments and those added conditions, I can make the findings outlined in the staff report regarding the environmental review, the coastal development permit, and the development plan, and approve your project subject to the conditions of approval as I've amended them today. My action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and that includes if you go away and you really want to fight that condition, you can appeal the conditions of approval. Mm-hmm. They also have oversight authority of all my actions, and if they felt this warranted additional discussion before them, they could call it up during that same 10-day review period. And if either of those would occur, Allison would contact you. Okay. Thanks. I adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.